Let's take a short break with a homegrown uplifting track. This is Be Who You Wanna Be from Newcastle band Never Say Never Music.
Be who you wanna be.
This is for the struggle. This is for the hustle.
Be who you wanna be.
This is for the struggle. Come on, use that muscle.
Check out Be Who You Wanna Be and more from Never Say Never Music on your favourite streaming platform or visit neversaynevermusic.com.
Bring it back.
Ever have one of those moments where you go, I don't quite think I'm the one for that job, or I'm the one who can do that, or I don't think that really fits me. And then the more it goes on, the more you go, maybe this is actually my thing, and maybe I am supposed to suddenly play a bigger part in this world than I thought. That's the story of Clare Steele. She's the CEO of Compassion Australia. She's going to share that with us. And then as she heads further into that in this week of the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, she's going to be talking to us a bit more about what it means to actually care about justice in this world and to make a difference to the situations of poverty for so many across our world. Looking forward to sharing Clare's interview with you here on the Towards Understanding podcast. Let's get stuck into this conversation with Clare. Clare, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Clayton. I always love chatting to you.
It's wonderful to be able to talk to you about this topic. We want to talk a bit more about all of the work that Compassion is doing and also this sort of more bigger perspective around it. But specifically at the moment on the sort of International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, sometimes I sort of have this sort of love-hate relationship with these sorts of days, that sometimes they became a bit sort of jingoistic and someone clicks like on a page on social media or something like that and, oh, well, job's done, that sort of thing. And yet, on the other hand, they're an incredible opportunity to take a moment like we are and really have this discussion. How do you feel about these sorts of days, and what's always your heart and mission as you're talking to these sorts of things?
I think my heart on these days is to remind people to look bigger than their own world. And in my role, I have the great joy of travelling to communities and seeing that. But you can get so caught up in the day-to-day that you forget. And so my job on days like this is to remind others of those that have no voice, the most vulnerable in our world. And it's a joy to speak about the people I meet. So I actually look forward to these days now with joy.
Yeah, that's great. We'll talk a bit more about Compassion as well, but just sort of the 20-second headline, if somebody doesn't know what Compassion Australia is, how do you describe that?
We work with children living in extreme poverty around the world, and we do it in their communities through their local churches. Currently, 2.4 million children in our program, and that's all because of amazing supporters around the world.
Yeah, wonderful. Clare, we're going to talk specifically around poverty, justice. We're going to talk about injustice as well, and we're going to have these chats today. But can we start with your story specifically? Could you talk to us a little bit about how you started saying, look, I want to get involved actually in places of standing up for those who are doing it tough, for those for no fault of their own might find themselves in these situations. Was this always a sort of a part of who you were as you were growing up, or is this something that you've come to really connect in more with later in life?
It's a really great question. I think like many children, I always had this innate sense of fairness and wanting people to have the same ability to do whatever they want as I did. But for me, the real change came when I first went to Cebu. It was the first time I'd ever seen extreme poverty. And you just walk through these streets and your heart is breaking. You walk along laneways that never see dark, like layers and layers of houses that light doesn't even penetrate. There's sewage running through these homes. They're built out of rubbish. Kids as young as 2 walk kilometres to collect water or sell rubbish on the side of the road just to be able to get some food. And in these places, like all I can do is call out to God, and really question him, angry to begin with, like, where are you? How dare you leave this community? Because that's how it felt to me. But then as you walk further, you see these moments of light and of joy. And for me, this happens every time I walk into a local church. And it's just an oasis of hope in desperation. And so you walk in here and you realize we don't have to ask where God is. He's here. But what he's asking us is, will we join him? And coming back from that first visit to Cebu, I didn't think I was able to look away anymore because I didn't want a world where this happens and people don't care. And so I had to care and I had to think about how I was going to respond.
And so how did that start for you? Like, I'm assuming you didn't then go, well, righty, I'll knock on the door and I'll become the CEO of Compassion. What was the journey for you?
Yeah, it didn't happen that way at all. My husband and I, my husband was a pastor of a church. And so what we did was create a partnership with Compassion. We knew about Compassion. We knew that the solution they had was powerful. And we just started talking to our church about that. Would you support a child? Would you be part of this ministry? And really, I thought that would be it. That would be my role, to be the voice of what I saw and be able to describe to others what is happening. And about a year later, I was working in the city in Sydney and I rode home to our house in Five Dock. And I said to my husband, the Compassion CEO has just retired. But we've really got to pray about this because it's a ministry we love and we want the right person in this role. And he was in the middle of work. I'd interrupted him. So he sort of just looked up and he said, I think maybe you should think of applying for the role. I sort of just laughed that off and walked away. But as we considered what was needed for Compassion, where we were at as a family and what our impact could be, how God could use us in this current time, it led to me applying for the role and still surprised and honoured that I was selected. And that meant our family moved from Sydney up to Newcastle and really for us begin to think about what does us really stepping into this role to be the voice of those that do have no voice.
Let's talk a little bit around some of the words that we use. When we talk about poverty, there's different understandings of that. There's certain aspects of poverty in an Australian or New Zealand culture versus other cultures and communities around the world. What do you define as poverty when you refer to that?
It's a really great question, Clayton. And I like to think of poverty as holistic. It's an environment where you're in that means that you can't hope, you can't dream. When we talk about extreme poverty, it's an environment where you don't know if you have a meal the next day. You don't know if your house is safe. You don't know if you have a family to support you. From a technical definition, we talk about it as under $2 US a day. But I think what is more powerful is what poverty creates in a person. It's that real sense of hopelessness, survival. It's literally, where is my next meal coming from? How am I going to feed my family? How am I going to find cover from this rain? Poverty really is taking away any options that you have.
And I think, there's times when we find ourselves perhaps in communities or in conversations where we go, oh, well, somebody's, let's use a very sort of local example, somebody who might be in poverty in an Australian or New Zealand perspective. We go, oh, well, they're probably, the reason they're on the streets or whatever it might be, they made bad choices, these sorts of things. It's really easy to have a really judgmental mindset. Does that happen as well when we're looking at an international sort of extreme poverty situation? Is that a mindset that many of us in Australia and New Zealand perhaps have a wrong perspective of, or do you think is it something that's understood clearly?
Oh, no, I think you're exactly right. I think we do have a mindset of maybe if they worked harder, maybe they're lazy, maybe they just haven't tried everything they have. And I think even if we don't think that at the top of our mind, sometimes they are the thoughts that we've been indoctrinated into. I just think about it as I was lucky to be born into Australia, into the family that I was born into. That is the single thing that has decided my journey for my life. That is the main difference between me and a person living in a slum in Cebu or in Kampala or in India. That's the number one difference.
Why is it that we perhaps don't like focusing on that? And, I'm perhaps being a little bit generalist here. Is it because we feel like, well, it's just too much to change that environment, so I'm not going to focus on the fact that, well, I'm just really privileged, or is there other reasons that perhaps as a country, as a society, that we're not much more generous to those in other places around our world who are facing extreme poverty?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I like to think it's not because we're not generous. I like to give us the benefit of the doubt. And as I think about how we engage our world is so full of noise. My favourite moment is the morning. I often get up about 5 a.m. and there's just silence. And you can hear the birds start to sing and you can hear the day begin. There's very few moments in our life where we actually have the chance to listen and understand. And so I think it's a lack of listening and understanding to the life of others outside of our world. And I also don't think we have the opportunity to tell those stories very often. We see them in very quick shots of slums or of people overseas, maybe a 30-second story. We don't have the opportunity to deeply understand and be moved with compassion because we don't listen well enough.
One of the things I know that we even had a chat off air around, and when we're sort of defining terms and understandings and then exploring the depth of that around poverty, is also justice, or what often is called social justice. And I know you sort of said to me, look, I don't quite like calling it social justice. Could you talk to us a bit more around what justice means in your understanding and as you look at the world?
Yeah, I really go back to the Bible to define justice. And you're right, I don't like social justice because I don't think we should qualify justice. I think when we do, we reduce what God means by justice. I love that the beginning of the Bible describes this beautiful world he created. Could have just said God created this great world, but instead it shows us what he wanted. It shows light and dark in the right places. It shows a myriad of creatures, of the vegetation. It shows God in right relationship with people and people in right relationship with the world. God gives us that picture because that's what he wants for our world. And then we have the whole 66 of the books of the Bible that show us that God is trying to draw us back to that. And we end with that beautiful picture in Revelation 21 where God said he will create a new world and he will be with us. He will be with his people. And just every time I walk through a community of poverty, I just remember these words. There'll be no more mourning, no more crying, no more shame. That will be all gone because we'll be back to creation as God intended. So when I think about justice, I think about the renewal of the world, the transformation, redemption of the world as God originally intended it.
So deliberately devil's advocate question for a minute. If that's the sort of the processing and the way of looking at it, why not say, well, that's everything will be all right for everybody in the end. Why do I have to play my part of justice right now?
Yeah, you could definitely think about it like that. I love the devil's advocate question that, why is it my job? I think the Bible's pretty clear that it's our job. God calls his people to be a people of justice. You see it throughout the Old Testament prophets. One of my favorites is Zechariah. They're coming back from exile and God's talking about how they're going to live in the land. And he says, I'm sick of your fasting. I'm sick of your services. What I want is you to administer true justice, care for the vulnerable. And one of my favorite pictures of justice is in Zechariah 8. And he says, how will you know when justice has come? It says, men and women will be, with their cane in hand, be sitting along the streets, and boys and girls will be playing there. We have this honor of the God of the universe inviting us in to bring justice to this world. And I just think, what an invitation. Like, we're talking massive justice. God could do this in a blink of an eye, but instead he says to his people, will you be part of building this with me? I just don't know how you can turn down an invitation like that.
The CEO of Compassion Australia, Clare Steele, is my guest on Towards Understanding. We're going to be back with Clare in the next little while to continue talking about this upcoming International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. And we'll be asking her, is actually the eradication of poverty a realistic aim? Is that actually something that she thinks we can achieve? We're going to talk a bit more about the work of Compassion Australia and hear some of those remarkable stories that Clare will share with us on the way next on Towards Understanding.
Share your brand, your event, your message across 90 Christian radio stations and major cities in Australia and New Zealand by sponsoring Towards Understanding, hosted by Clayton Bielan. More than 210,000 people tune into Towards Understanding each week, and with just one sponsorship, you'll reach this immense engaged audience. Find out more about this exciting and unique opportunity now on the sponsorship page at positivemedia.com.au.
Claire, we talked a little bit about poverty before. We've talked about justice. We talked about these are why you are so passionate about the work that you do at Compassion, about your personal mission to be a part of that. And indeed why I think, as you've talked as well, that anyone who perhaps calls themselves a Christian should be a part of God's plan to bring justice and support those who are certainly in difficult situations. This upcoming day, the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, does feel like that word eradication stands out a little bit. Is this something that's actually achievable, do you believe, or is it sort of one of those nice sort of aspirational goals? You sort of shoot for the stars, at least you'll reach the moon, that sort of idea?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And we had goals where we thought we would eradicate poverty. We've seen that COVID didn't help that. But what we are seeing is poverty is declining. Over the last 20, 30 years, we've seen many, many people come out of poverty. And so I think it's possible. Will we achieve it? I don't know. It's not, it's so multi-dimensional that it's hard to know if we will ever eradicate poverty. I don't think that means that we don't try, though.
From your perspective, and I'm imagining you in your role as well, like you're doing a lot of work both with those people who are, individuals who are supporting churches I know at Compassion, you work greatly with churches to let them see how they can participate. Then in various countries around the world, working with the churches there, working with individuals there. But I'm imagining work with government as well. How much role is government across the world an important part of the eradication of poverty, and how much should we be putting on sort of individuals to be changing this rather than the governments?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and Compassion actually doesn't work with government as much as other organisations, but it's important to understand what an individual can do versus what a government can do. And what I love is when governments do what they can do, and we as individuals and as the church step into what we can do. And so obviously we need legislation change, we need policy change, we need debt eradication, we need all of that government level, multilateral level system change. But at the same time, we need people to say, I care, and I'm going to be generous, and I'm going to be the voice, and I'm going to take part in this change as well. So they work hand in hand, and when they're working well, you'll see magnification of the impact because they're working well together.
Claire, could you share two stories with us? One I'm thinking about of somebody who you just love around this world. You love sharing their story of, they were sponsored as perhaps a child in a village setting, a church setting, whatever it might be, and their life has changed. And likewise, a story of somebody who has responded to Compassion Australia and had their life changed by being a sponsor. Could you share those sorts of stories with us?
I sure could. And I'm going to share one that I've just recently returned from Africa. I met this amazing grandmother, Beatrice. Beatrice grew up in a very dysfunctional family. She ended up on the streets. She ended up addicted to drugs. And of her three children, two died young, and her oldest son had left her. And so she was, at quite a young age, pretty much destitute, in prostitution and selling drugs on the street. Her son returned with a grandchild and left this grandchild with Beatrice and left again. And at that point, Beatrice didn't actually know what was possible. The church reached out and her grandson became a participant in the Compassion Project. But one of the things in Rwanda that we do is every caregiver has to join an association when their child joins the project. And so Beatrice had to join an association. And in this association, the first thing they do is they hear that they were made in God's image and that God did not intend them to live in poverty. Many people in Rwanda feel like they were made to live in poverty. And so the first thing is we tell them how special, that they are made in God's image and that He loves them. And then from there, we help them build skills. This association becomes a cooperative. They save into this. And so Beatrice was able to begin to have animals. She was then be able to sow. She's been able to buy a block of land. She's been able to build her own house. And when I met her just 6 weeks ago, she declared so proudly, I've been released from poverty in Jesus' name. My grandson goes to school. I now pay his fees. I pay his hospital insurance. And a month ago, I adopted an orphan so that he too can be released from poverty in Jesus' name. It's very hard to not have tears running down your eyes when you hear something like that. And she said, the church is now my life. They gave me life when I thought I had none.
Well, no wonder you like telling that story, Claire. That's remarkable.
It's amazing.
Just a reflection on that. I think this is one of the things that at times, and certainly, my work in radio for the last few decades, as I've worked with different organisations like Compassion who have work overseas in different perspectives to understand the ripple effects of helping one child or one person or one whatever it might be. There is so much ripple effects throughout family and community that are just making huge impacts. And I think this is another perfect example of that.
Yeah, definitely is. Yeah. And then supporters, how does being part of the Ministry of Compassion change your life? I'm going to tell a story about my own church that when we first went to visit the work of Compassion, we went, it was a small group, there was about 8 of us, with quite a few children coming with us as well. And we were a bit nervous taking our young children on a trip to extreme poverty. We're used to very safe environment in Australia. We weren't quite sure what we were going to see. And as we did, we walked through streets. I remember the one that really haunted us the most is we went to a community in Cebu that had started living in the empty cemetery. So they had families living in tombs, and this was the only cover they had. And I remember one of the men in my church, he came back, and I've never seen him so unable to speak. He said, there's a 2-year-old daughter, a girl, Claire. She's gone to hope. She lives in a tomb. She sleeps in a crypt at night. What am I going to do? And so he organised for this child to come to the Compassion Project. He supported her, and he has been very generous to the family to help them create income generation, to have their own vegetable patch, to move out of the cemetery. But what was most amazing was when he came back to Australia, he changed his involvement in his church. He now was the one cooking breakfast on a Sunday morning to welcome people at church. He was the first at the door. He'd seen how the church in Cebu was changing the community and changing people's lives. And he was passionate that our church in Sydney could do the same. This insight into what the church could be totally transformed him and transformed how he was living his life.
It really is remarkable. And I think that's the opportunity as we come up to a day like the Eradication of Poverty this week, to be thinking about it. What would be your suggestion, Claire, for somebody who's been sitting and hearing these, and I'm sure, get involved with Compassion Australia is obviously an opportunity. Is there, beyond that, are there other things that even people just should be thinking about this first week, this idea of this, and to say, well, what are my next steps of how I can make a difference?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to think about making a difference, because when we talk about poverty, whether it's extreme poverty, whether it's poverty in Australia, the numbers are so big. A number of homeless on the streets, a number of foster children in hotels every night, the number of children overseas who don't have a meal. Like, we're talking millions and hundreds of thousands, and these numbers get too big. And so I really love going back to the good neighbour parable that Jesus has, because what we see is this good neighbour walked past a need, and he didn't stop and say, oh, is this the best way I could use my funds? Is this going to have the biggest impact? He understood the need, and he moved with compassion to help the person that was put in front of him. And so I think that's where we start. We start with the need that God puts in front of us, and we just understand what we can do. And so it might be sponsoring a child. It might be having a conversation with the person that is homeless that you walk past every day on the streets. It might be sitting and talking to the lonely neighbour next door to you. Poverty is so diverse. There are so many ways we can act. And I think if we open our eyes to the need in front of us, that's the best way we can respond.
Clare, thank you so much for what you are doing and all of the work that you're doing. There's always the ability to just share with such incredible passion and heart and care for so many. One final question from me is, what is the next spaces and places that you see the work that you are doing and maybe the work Compassion is doing that is maybe different to what we are seeing, maybe because of the culture of this year? We've heard a lot around, USAID and pulling out a lot of funding, and that's had a lot of impact for a lot of various places around the world in some of the care for the absolute marginalised in our world. Do you see a difference of care and compassion in the broader sense of those words around agencies and things like that in the next few years?
Yeah, it's definitely changed the world, the decision that USAID made, and has both positive and negative impacts. I was recently in northern Uganda in a refugee settlement, 45,000 South Sudanese in this settlement, and the reduction in grants, not just from USAID, just in the sector in general, has reduced the food they have daily. So we're seeing impacts daily for people around the world. But at the same time, it is an opportunity for us to ask what we can do. It's also an opportunity for the sector to consider, how can we do more with less? How can we make interventions more cost effective? How can we enable these communities to to have their own economic livelihood? It is having impact, and it is really day-to-day life impact, but it's an opportunity for us to be generous and to consider how we act in new ways.
Clare, thank you again for your time. Thank you for having the conversation with us today as well. And we wish you all the best. We encourage everybody to be able to make that difference, support the works of things like Compassion Australia and all of the work that is happening around our world. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much, Clayton.
Ahead of the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, the CEO of Compassion Australia, Clare Steele, has been my guest on Towards Understanding.
Let's take a short break with a homegrown uplifting track. This is Be Who You Wanna Be from Newcastle band Never Say Never Music.
Be who you wanna be.
This is for the struggle. This is for the hustle.
Be who you wanna be.
This is for the struggle. Come on, use that muscle.
Check out Be Who You Wanna Be and more from Never Say Never Music on your favourite streaming platform, or visit neversaynevermusic.com.
Bring it back.